The sensor operator aboard the Vathari monitoring station Vigilance of Crowns was halfway through a cup of bitter root tea when his console lit up with a contact he had never seen before. He set the cup down slowly. His 4 eyes narrowed at the holographic display, and he ran the scan again, then a third time. The results did not change. A vessel had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the very edge of Sector Darval, the innermost patrol zone of the Vathari Empire. This was the heart of Imperial space. No foreign ship had entered this sector uninvited in over 200 years. The last one that tried had been reduced to dust before it finished decelerating. But this ship had not tried to hide. It carried no cloak. It broadcast no scrambling signal. It simply appeared like a stone dropped into still water and began drifting forward at sublight speed, slowly, patiently, as if it had nowhere else to be. The operator pulled up the vessel's profile. It was small, barely 1.2 kilometers from bow to stern. The Empire fielded warships 10 times that size. The 2 Apex-class super dreadnoughts stationed in this very sector were each 12 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack a moon in half. By comparison, this newcomer was a pebble next to a mountain. But the readings made no sense. The hull composition matched nothing in any known database. The energy output was paradoxical. The ship appeared to be running cold, its systems barely ticking over, yet the latent power signature buried beneath that quiet exterior was enormous. It was like staring at a sleeping predator and knowing, somehow, that it was only pretending to sleep. The operator's claws hovered over the alert button. He hesitated. Perhaps it was a malfunction. Perhaps it was a lost merchant vessel from some minor species that had stumbled into the wrong region of space. He almost dismissed it. Then the ship's identification transponder activated. The words appeared on his screen in clean, simple text, translated automatically into Imperial Standard. UEN Adriatic United Earth Navy, Vanguard-class warship. The operator's blood went cold. His hand slammed down on the alert button so hard that the console cracked beneath his claws. Within minutes, the report climbed the chain of command like fire racing up a dry tree. Station commanders passed it to sector admirals. Sector admirals passed it to the Imperial Strategic Command. Encrypted channels that had been silent for decades suddenly burned with activity. Officers who had spent their entire careers in comfortable peacetime postings felt something they had only read about in old war reports, a deep, instinctive fear that settled into their stomachs like a swallowed stone. The word spread through the military in whispers at first, then in shouts. A human ship, a human warship, inside the Empire. Most of the officers had never seen a human vessel in person. Humanity was reclusive. They kept to their own borders, their own worlds, their own silence. They did not attend galactic summits. They did not join trade coalitions. They did not send ambassadors to imperial courts or participate in the endless political games that occupied every other species in the galaxy. They simply existed, quiet and watchful, behind borders that no one had dared to cross in 40 years. Because 40 years ago, the galaxy had learned what happened when you crossed those borders. It was called the 11-Day War, though most species refused to speak its name aloud. A coalition of 3 spacefaring civilizations, the Droon, the Vashkari, and the Pelian hegemony, had decided that humanity's home system was too resource-rich and too poorly defended to ignore. Earth was a young world, they reasoned. Humans had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. They were primitive, disorganized, soft. The coalition assembled a fleet of 900 warships and jumped into Earth's solar system, expecting a quick and easy conquest. The war lasted 11 days. The coalition lost all 900 ships, Earth lost none. Not a single human vessel was destroyed. The reports that filtered back from the survivors, and there were very few survivors, painted a picture that haunted every military strategist in the galaxy. Human ships were not elegant. They were not beautiful. They were ugly, brutal machines, thick-armored, bristling with redundant weapon systems, layered with backups for every backup. They were designed by engineers who assumed that everything would go wrong, and then planned for things to go even worse than that. Their weapons phased through shields that had protected fleets for 1,000 years. Their missiles changed course mid-flight, adapting to evasion patterns in real time. Their point defense systems fired so fast and so accurately that entire salvos of torpedoes were wiped out before they crossed half the distance to their targets. And through it all, the humans had been calm. Their communications, intercepted and translated after the war, revealed no panic, no rage, no battle cries. Just quiet, professional voices coordinating with the cold efficiency of surgeons performing an operation. After the 11-day war, humanity withdrew behind its borders and said nothing. It issued no threats. It made no demands. It simply went silent, and that silence was more terrifying than any declaration of war could have been. Because everyone understood what that silence meant. It meant that humanity was building, preparing, watching. And if the 11-day war was what they could do 40 years ago, no one wanted to imagine what they could do now. And now, for the first time in 4 decades, a human warship had appeared inside foreign space. Not at the borders, not in a neutral zone, inside the innermost sector of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The report reached Admiral Thyssenkor within the hour. He stood on the command bridge of the mobile fortress Throne of Embers, the greatest warship the Empire had ever built, and stared at the holographic image of the Adriatic rotating slowly before him. It looked so small, so ordinary, just a dark, angular shape drifting through the void. His aide, a young officer named Dressen, stood at his side with a data tablet clutched in trembling hands. "Admiral," Dressen said, his voice tight, "should I scramble the sector fleet?" Kor did not answer immediately. He studied the image. He thought about the 11-day war. He thought about 900 ships burning in the dark around a small blue world. He thought about the silence that had followed 40 years of silence, heavy and patient and full of promise. "Admiral," Dressen pressed. Kor exhaled slowly through his teeth. His reflection stared back at him from the surface of the holographic display, and for the first time in his long career, the face looking back at him appeared old. "One ship," Kor said quietly. "They only ever send one." He turned away from the display and clasped his hands behind his back. "Scramble the fleet," he ordered. "All of it. Every ship we have in range, and pray to whatever gods still listen that one ship is all they intend to send." Dressen saluted and rushed from the bridge. Kor remained standing alone, watching the image of the Adriatic drift forward through the dark, and he felt the weight of the galaxy shift beneath his feet like the first tremor before an earthquake. Somewhere out there, in the cold silence between the stars, the humans had finally moved, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The news broke across the galaxy like a crack spreading through glass. No one knew who leaked it first. Perhaps it was a communications officer aboard one of the patrol stations. Perhaps it was a diplomat with loose lips and a private channel. It did not matter. Within 6 hours of the Adriatic's arrival, every major species in the galaxy knew that a human warship was sitting inside the Vathari Empire's most protected sector, and the reaction was immediate and violent. The Rithali Confederation recalled its ambassador from the Empire before the day was over. The Jorvine Trade Syndicate, which controlled nearly a third of all commercial shipping in the Eastern Quadrant, froze every route within 3 jumps of Sector Darval. Insurance companies across 12 systems declared force majeure on all cargo contracts in the region. Trade ships that were already in transit reversed course and fled for neutral ports. Within hours, an entire section of the galaxy's economy ground to a halt, not because of war, but because of the mere presence of a single vessel. On the diplomatic channels, the chatter was frantic. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries began sending urgent messages back and forth. Old rivals suddenly found common ground in their shared terror. Every government, every military, every intelligence agency asked the same question, and none of them had an answer. Why is it there? That was the part that frightened them most, not the ship itself, but the silence that surrounded it. Humanity had said nothing, no announcement, no declaration, no warning. The Adriatic had simply appeared and the humans offered no explanation. In the absence of information, every species filled the void with its own fears, and those fears were vast. Aboard the Adriatic itself, things were remarkably quiet. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in her command chair on the bridge, reviewing status reports on a tablet while her crew worked around her with practiced calm. She was a lean woman in her late 40s, with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that missed nothing. There was no tension in her posture, no urgency in her movements. She read each report, signed off on it, and moved to the next one as if this were any other patrol. The bridge of the Adriatic reflected everything the galaxy feared about humanity, not because it was impressive, but because it was not. There were no golden arches, no sweeping windows looking out at the stars, no ornamental displays of power. The walls were bare metal. The stations were functional. The lighting was flat and even. Everything was designed for one purpose, and that purpose was not beauty. Vasquez's first officer, Commander David Okafor, approached her chair and leaned in. "The Empire has assembled a response fleet," he said in a low voice. 340 warships, including 2 Apex-class superdreadnoughts. They are holding at 200,000 kilometers. Vasquez did not look up from her tablet. Time to position. Already there, they moved fast. Good, that means they are taking this seriously. Okafor studied her face for a moment. He had served under Vasquez for 7 years, and he had never once seen her raise her voice or lose her composure. She led the way a surgeon operated, with steady hands and absolute focus. "Captain," he said carefully, 340 ships is a significant commitment. That is nearly half their sector strength. Vasquez finally looked up. There was the faintest trace of something in her eyes, not fear, not arrogance, but a quiet, tired patience. The look of someone who had done this before and hoped she would not have to do it again. "It is not enough," she said simply, "and they know it." She returned to her reports. Okafor said nothing more and went back to his station. 200,000 kilometers away, aboard the Throne of Embers, Admiral Kor was discovering just how right Vasquez was. His fleet surrounded the Adriatic in a standard containment formation, a sphere of warships designed to cut off all angles of escape and concentrate fire from every direction. It was the same formation that had crushed a dozen rebellions and ended 3 wars. Against any known enemy, it was overwhelming. Bakor's intelligence officer, a thin and nervous woman named Sindra Velth, had just placed a report on his desk that made the formation feel like a circle of candles around a bonfire. "The Adriatic has been performing passive scans since it arrived," Velth said, standing at attention with her hands clasped behind her back. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her unease. "Low-level sensor sweeps, nothing aggressive, nothing that would trigger our countermeasures." Kor looked at the report, and in 6 hours it has mapped every ship in the sector fleet, every station, every orbital defense platform, every mine field, every sensor buoy. It has cataloged the energy output, weapon loadouts, shield frequencies, and crew complements of all 340 vessels in the response fleet. Velth paused. It also identified the 12 stealth frigates we positioned behind the gas giant in Grid 7. Those ships were running full electronic silence. Kor stared at her. "That is not possible. Our own survey of Sector Darval took 3 years. "Yes, Admiral. The Adriatic completed a more thorough survey in 6 hours, and it did so passively without active scans that we could detect or jam." Velth swallowed. "Admiral, We did not even know we could be scanned like this. The technology required to do what they have done is beyond anything in our models. Our analysts do not understand how it works." Kor set the report down on his desk and placed both hands flat on either side of it. He was quiet for a long time. "What are they doing now?" he asked. "Nothing, Admiral. The ship is holding position. It has not raised shields. It has not powered weapons. It is simply sitting there. They scanned our entire sector defense network in 6 hours, and they are just sitting there." "Yes, Admiral." Kor closed his eyes. He understood now, with a clarity that cut like a blade, what the Adriatic silence meant. The humans were not hiding their capabilities. They were displaying them. Every scan, every mapped ship, every identified hidden frigate was a message written in the language of military power, and the message was simple. "We see everything, we know everything, and we are not afraid of you." Kor opened his eyes and straightened his uniform. "Open a channel to the human vessel," he ordered. "Direct hail, Imperial Authority codes. I want to speak to their captain personally." The channel was opened. Kor stood before the communication array and spoke with all the authority and weight of his rank. "Human vessel Adriatic, this is Admiral Thyssen Kor of the Vathari Imperial Fleet. You have entered sovereign Imperial space without authorization. You will identify your purpose and withdraw immediately, or you will be treated as a hostile combatant. Respond." The silence stretched for 10 long seconds. Then the reply came, a single voice, calm and clear and entirely unimpressed by the 340 warships surrounding her. "Admiral Kor, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Navy. Thank you for your hail. We are here to speak with the Vathari Empire regarding a matter of mutual concern. We will wait." The channel closed. That was all. No demands, no threats, no posturing, just a polite acknowledgement and a single, quiet word that carried more weight than any weapon. "Wait." And so they waited. The Adriatic sat motionless in the center of the Empire's mightiest fleet, a small dark shape surrounded by giants, and it did not flinch. It did not blink. It simply waited, patient and still, like a predator that had already chosen its moment and was in no hurry to strike. Around the galaxy, billions of beings watched and held their breath. And in the silence between the stars, the tremors of something vast and unavoidable began to spread. 3 days passed. The Adriatic did not move. The Empire's fleet did not move. And across the galaxy, every species with a communication array watched the standoff with growing dread. On the Rithali homeworld of Chelver, Ambassador Chelian stood before the closed session of the Confederation's High Council and tried to explain to a room full of frightened politicians why a single human warship was more dangerous than everything the Empire could put in front of it. "You are asking the wrong question," Chelian said. She was an old woman by Rithali standards, nearly 200 years, and she had spent her entire career studying the species that most civilizations preferred to pretend did not exist. "You keep asking what the humans can do. That is not what matters. What matters is understanding why they can do it." The council chamber was silent. Chelian paced slowly before the curved table of representatives, her long robes trailing behind her. "Every species in this galaxy developed technology for a reason," she continued. "The Vathari built their fleets to conquer. The Jorvine built their trade networks to profit. We built our science to understand. But the humans—" She stopped packing and turned to face the council. "Humans built everything they have because they were afraid." She let the word hang in the air. They did not come from a gentle world. Earth is a planet of extremes, scorching deserts, frozen wastelands, oceans that swallow continents, and storms that flatten cities. The creatures they evolved alongside were not cooperative. They were predators, competitors, threats. For most of their history, humans were not the dominant species on their own world. They were prey. A council member raised a hand. "Ambassador, they are clearly not prey any longer." "No," Chelian agreed. They are not, and that is precisely the point. They did not become what they are because they wanted power or glory. They became what they are because every step of their existence was a fight to survive. Fire was not a discovery for them, it was a weapon against the dark. Agriculture was not an innovation, it was a defense against starvation. Medicine was not a luxury, it was a war against plagues that killed them by the millions. She moved to the center of the chamber and lowered her voice. And when they finally looked up at the stars, they did not see wonder. They saw the next threat, the next unknown, the next thing that might kill them. So they built ships not for exploration but for survival. They designed weapons not for conquest but for defense. Every system, every redundancy, every impossible technology they possess was created by a species that has spent its entire existence expecting the worst and preparing for something even worse than that. The chamber was so quiet that Chelian could hear the hum of the ventilation systems. "That is why one ship is enough," she said, "because humans do not build ships to fight wars, they build ships to end them." Back in Sector Darval, the standoff continued. Admiral Kor had not slept in 2 days. He stood on the bridge of the Throne of Embers, surrounded by aides and advisors who had nothing useful to tell him. The Adriatic sat at the center of his fleet like a stone in a river, and the river had no idea how to move it. His ships held formation. His weapons were charged. His crews were at battle stations. And none of it mattered because he did not know what the humans wanted, and until he did, every option was a gamble with stakes he could not afford to lose. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "the Adriatic is hailing us. They are requesting a direct channel to you, priority signal." Kor straightened, "Put it through." The holographic display flickered, and the image of Captain Vasquez appeared before him. She was seated in her command chair, calm and composed, with her hands resting on the armrests. Behind her, the bridge of the Adriatic was dim and functional gray walls, soft lighting, the quiet glow of instruments. No decoration, no ceremony, just purpose. "Admiral Kor," Vasquez said. Her voice was even, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it, a weight, a gravity that had nothing to do with rank or authority. "Thank you for taking my hail. I will be direct." "Please do," Kor said stiffly. 36 hours before my ship entered your space, a Vathari client species, the Droon, launched a military attack on a human colony world called Elysium. Elysium is a border settlement, farming communities, research stations, families. Vasquez paused. Her expression did not change, but something shifted behind her eyes, a flicker of something old and heavy that she kept carefully controlled. The Droon landed ground forces and orbital strike teams. They burned the settlements. They destroyed the hospitals, the schools, the shelters where people were hiding. When it was over, 4,300 civilians were dead. Another pause. 1,100 of them were children. The bridge of the Throne of Embers went silent. Every officer, every aide, every guard standing at the doors stopped what they were doing. Kor felt the blood drain from his face. "The Droon are a client species of the Vathari Empire," Vasquez continued. "They operate under your authority, your treaties, and your protection. Their military answers to your command structure. Under galactic law and under your own imperial codes, their actions are the Empire's responsibility." Kor opened his mouth, but no words came. "I am not here to threaten you, Admiral," Vasquez said. "I am not here to start a war. I am here because 4,300 of my people are dead, and 1,100 of them never had the chance to grow up. I am here because someone in your empire made the decision to kill them, and that decision requires an answer." She leaned forward slightly in her chair. "I am here to discuss the Empire's response, and I am willing to wait as long as necessary for that response to be the right one." The channel remained open. Kor stared at the image of the human captain and saw something that terrified him more than any weapon or fleet or battle formation. He saw grief. Controlled, disciplined, tightly contained grief. the kind that did not scream or rage but simply settled into the bones and refused to leave. The kind that drove a species to cross the galaxy in a single ship and sit calmly in the heart of an empire, surrounded by hundreds of warships, and wait. "Captain Vasquez," Kor said slowly, "I was not aware of this attack. I did not authorize it. I need time to investigate." "Then investigate," Vasquez replied. "We are not going anywhere." The channel closed. Kor stood in silence for a long moment. Then he turned to his intelligence officer. "Velth, find out everything about what happened on Elysium. I want to know who ordered the drone to attack, who authorized it, and who knew about it. I want answers within 12 hours. "Yes, Admiral." "And Velth?" "Sorry." Kor's voice dropped low, and the officers closest to him could hear the edge of fear that he no longer tried to hide. "If someone in this empire ordered the murder of 1,100 children and then let me stand here blind while a human warship parked itself in our most secure sector, I want to know their name. Because right now, the humans are being patient. They are being civilized. They are giving us a chance to do the right thing." He looked back at the holographic display, where the Adriatic sat motionless among his fleet. "And I promise you, I have studied every record from the 11-Day War, and I have read what happens when humanity runs out of patience. We do not want to see that. Not today. Not ever." The bridge crew moved with new urgency. The investigation began, and in the silence of space, the Adriatic waited, dark and still, carrying the names of 4,300 dead and the quiet, unshakable resolve of a species that had learned long ago that the universe was not kind, and had decided with every fiber of its being that it would protect its own anyway. The investigation took 8 hours instead of 12, because the truth was not buried deep. It was barely hidden at all. Intelligence Officer Velth stood before Admiral Kor in his private war room aboard the Throne of Embers, and delivered her findings in a voice that was steady, but colored with a quiet fury she did not bother to disguise. "The attack on Elysium was ordered by Grand Minister Solar," she said. "He authorized the Drune 4th Expeditionary Force to cross the border and strike the colony. The orders were issued through a back channel that bypassed standard military command. You were deliberately kept out of the loop, Admiral. So was the rest of Strategic Command." Kor sat in his chair and said nothing for a long time. Grand Minister Solar. Of course it was Solar. The man had been a thorn in the side of the military for years, a political creature who believed that the empire had grown soft, that its dominance was slipping, that what it needed was a great enemy to rally against. He had argued publicly many times that humanity was that enemy, that the humans were cowards who hid behind their borders, and that a single decisive blow would expose their weakness and unite the empire in a glorious war of expansion. "What was his objective?" Kor asked quietly. "Provocation," Velth answered. "He wanted to draw humanity into a conflict. He believed that if the empire was forced into a war with the humans, the population would rally behind the government, military spending would increase, and his political faction would consolidate power. He calculated that humanity would respond with overwhelming force, which would justify a full imperial mobilization." "He calculated," Kor repeated, tasting the word like poison. "Yes, Admiral. He calculated that the empire could win a prolonged war against humanity through superior numbers and industrial capacity." Kor closed his eyes. "He calculated wrong." "Yes, Admiral, he did." Kor stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, the fleet hung in formation, 340 warships arranged in perfect geometric patterns around the small, dark shape of the Adriatic. He had spent his career believing that the Vathari Imperial Fleet was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Looking at it now, arranged around that single human vessel like a crowd of giants standing nervously around a loaded weapon, he was not sure he believed that anymore. "Where is Solar now?" he asked. "On the Imperial capital world. He is aware of the situation. He has been making calls to his loyalists in the fleet. Kor turned sharply. His loyalists in my fleet. Velth nodded. Approximately 80 warships in the sector fleet are commanded by officers who owe their commissions to Solar's political patronage. We have intercepted communications suggesting he is urging them to take independent action if negotiations proceed in a direction he considers unacceptable. Kor absorbed this. 80 ships out of 340, nearly a quarter of his force. Commanded by officers whose loyalty ran not to the Empire, but to the ambitions of one man. A man who had murdered 4,000 civilians to start a war. He made his decision. Open a channel to Captain Vasquez. I will speak with her directly. The channel opened. Vasquez appeared on the display, exactly as before, calm, seated, patient. She looked as though she had not moved since their last conversation. Captain, Kor said, I have completed my investigation. The attack on Elysium was ordered by Grand Minister Solar, acting without military authorization. He used the drone as a proxy to provoke your species into a conflict that the Empire did not sanction and does not want. Vasquez listened without interruption. I want you to understand, Kor continued carefully, that this was not the act of the Vathari Empire. This was the act of one man pursuing personal power. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the same calm, measured tone as always. Admiral, I appreciate your honesty, but the drone are your client species. They operate under your authority. Whether one man or 1,000 men gave the order, 4,300 of my people are dead, and they were killed by forces flying your empire's flag. The distinction between official policy and one man's ambition does not matter to the families who lost their children. Kor flinched, but he did not argue. He could not argue she was right. What are your terms? He asked. Vasquez straightened slightly in her chair. When she spoke next, she did not speak only to Kor. She broadcast her words on an open channel, every frequency, every band, every diplomatic and military and civilian channel in range. The entire galaxy heard what she said. These are the terms of the United Earth Navy, delivered on behalf of the people of Elysium. First, the drone military forces responsible for the attack will be identified and surrendered to human custody for trial under galactic law. Second, the Vathari Empire will pay full reparations to the families of every civilian killed in the attack. Third, Grand Minister Solar, who ordered the attack, will be removed from power and surrendered to human custody to face justice for the murder of 4,300 civilians. Fourth, the Empire will sign a binding non-aggression treaty with humanity, to be enforced by independent galactic observers. She paused to let the words settle. These terms are not negotiable. They are not a starting point for discussion. They are what justice requires. The Empire may take whatever time it needs to comply, but compliance is expected. The open channel carried her voice across the stars, and billions of beings heard it. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 government buildings, officials and leaders and military commanders listened to a human captain dictate terms to the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and not a single one of them doubted that she meant every word. But there was one person who heard those terms and felt not fear but rage. Grand Minister Solar sat in his private office on the imperial capital, watching the broadcast with clenched fists and burning eyes. He was a tall man, sharp-featured, with the cold charisma of a born politician. He had spent 20 years building his power base, cultivating allies, positioning himself for the moment when the Empire would need a strong hand to guide it. The attack on Elysium was supposed to be that moment. Humanity was supposed to respond with fury, and the Empire was supposed to unite behind him. Instead, the humans had sent one ship, one captain, and that captain was calmly dismantling everything he had built. He could not allow it. Solar opened a secure channel to the 80 ship commanders who owed their careers to him. His message was short and direct. The human vessel is a threat to the Empire. If Admiral Kor will not act, we must. You have your orders. Fire on the Adriatic. Now. Aboard the Throne of Embers, Kor saw it happen in real time. 80 warships broke formation simultaneously, surging forward out of the containment sphere and accelerating toward the Adriatic with weapons hot. The rest of the fleet, his loyal ships, were caught off guard, their commanders shouting confused demands for orders over the command channel. "Admiral," Velth shouted, 80 vessels have broken formation. They are on attack vectors. Weapons are charging. Kor's blood turned to ice. "Signal them to stand down. All ships stand down immediately." "They are not responding, Admiral. They are broadcasting on Solar's private command frequency." "They are." The first volley fired. 80 warships unleashed everything they had at the Adriatic: plasma lances, kinetic accelerators, guided torpedoes, particle beams. Thousands of weapons fired simultaneously, and the void between the fleet and the human vessel lit up like a newborn sun. Kor gripped the railing of the command platform and watched the storm of fire converge on the small, dark ship at the center of it all. And then he heard something through the open channel, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Captain Vasquez's voice, calm and clear over the roar of incoming fire, speaking a single word to her crew. "Respond." The Adriatic woke up, and the galaxy learned once again what that word meant when a human said it. The battle lasted 3 minutes and 41 seconds. In that time, the galaxy's understanding of warfare power and the species called humanity was rewritten completely. The first volley from Solar's 80 warships was enormous. Thousands of weapons fired at once: plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, guided torpedoes, particle beams, all converging on the Adriatic from every angle. It was the kind of concentrated firepower that could crack the crust of a small moon. Any known warship in the galaxy would have been vaporized in the first 3 seconds. The Adriatic did not dodge. It did not retreat. It did not even raise its shields. Instead, its hull changed. The outer surface of the ship shifted, layers of adaptive armor reconfiguring in real time, flowing like liquid metal across the hull to meet incoming fire at precise angles. Energy weapons struck the surface and were absorbed. Kinetic rounds hit and were deflected into empty space. The armor did not simply block the attacks. It consumed them. Energy from every impact was channeled through the hull and fed directly into the ship's weapons capacitors. Every shot that hit the Adriatic made it more powerful. The first volley did nothing. The second volley did less. By the third volley, the attacking ships were beginning to understand that they were not damaging the human vessel. They were feeding it. Then the Adriatic fired back. Its point defense systems activated first. Tens of thousands of micro-turrets embedded across the hull came alive simultaneously, each one controlled by targeting systems that operated faster than any living mind could follow. The turrets did not fire blindly. They fired in coordinated patterns, creating overlapping fields of destruction that covered every approach vector. Torpedoes launched by the attacking ships were tracked, targeted, and destroyed within milliseconds of detection. Not a single one made it past the halfway point. With the incoming fire neutralized, the Adriatic's main weapons engaged. They were called Requiem lances, directed energy beams that did something no species had ever managed to counter. Instead of firing on a single energy frequency, each lance oscillated across 11 different frequencies simultaneously, cycling through them faster than any known shield system could adapt. Shields were designed to block one type of energy. When hit with 11 types at once, shifting and changing thousands of times per second, they simply collapsed. The first Requiem lance fired and cut through a heavy cruiser from bow to stern. The ship split apart in a silent flash, its shields failing before the crew even registered the hit. The second lance took out 2 destroyers that had been flying in close formation. The third, fourth, and fifth fired in rapid sequence, each one striking with surgical precision. The attacking fleet had 80 ships. 90 seconds after the Adriatic returned fire, there were 40. The surviving captains panicked. Some tried to regroup and concentrate their fire. Others broke formation and attempted to circle around the Adriatic to find a weak point. There was no weak point. The adaptive armor covered every surface. The point defense turrets covered every angle. The Requiem lances could track and fire in any direction without the ship needing to turn. 40 ships became 12 in another 60 seconds. The 12 survivors did the only thing left to them. They ran. They turned their ships and accelerated at maximum thrust, burning their engines to the breaking point. Desperate to get out of weapons range, for a brief moment it seemed as though they might escape. The Adriatic did not pursue. It did not need to. From launchers hidden along the ship's spine, a spread of torpedoes deployed. They were small, barely visible on sensors, and they moved with a speed that defied what the fleeing ship's crews thought possible. But speed was not what made them terrifying. What made them terrifying was that they learned. Each torpedo tracked its target independently, guided by an artificial intelligence that observed the target ship's evasion pattern, analyzed it, and adapted in real time. When a ship turned left, the torpedo adjusted. When a ship changed speed, the torpedo compensated. When a ship deployed countermeasures, the torpedo recognized the type, dismissed the decoys, and continued on its path without slowing down. 12 ships, 12 torpedoes, 12 clean hits. The last of Solar's fleet died in a final, quiet minute, each ship coming apart in a brief flash that faded quickly in the dark. Silence fell over Sector Darvo. 80 warships had attacked the Adriatic. The battle had lasted 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Every single attacking vessel had been destroyed. The Adriatic had sustained 7% hull damage. By the time the last debris settled, the adaptive armor was already repairing itself, the damaged sections flowing and reforming like a wound closing on living skin. 0 human casualties. Aboard the Throne of Embers, Admiral Kor stood frozen at the command railing. His remaining 260 ships had not fired a single shot. Their weapons were charged, their shields raised, their crews at battle stations, and not one captain had given the order to engage. They had watched 80 of their own ships be destroyed in less than 4 minutes, and every single one of them had made the same silent calculation. If that is what one human ship does when you attack it, what would it do if the rest of us tried? Kor's hands were trembling. He steadied them against the railing and took a breath that felt like swallowing broken glass. Then he opened a channel to the Adriatic. "Captain Vasquez," he said. His voice was hollow, stripped of all pride and pretense. "Your terms are accepted, all of them. The Droon forces will be surrendered. Reparations will be paid. Solar will be delivered to your custody." Vasquez's image appeared on the display. She looked exactly the same as she had before the battle, composed, still, her hands resting on the armrests of her chair. If she felt any satisfaction, she did not show it. If she felt any grief for the lives she had just taken, she kept it behind her eyes where no one could reach it. "Thank you, Admiral," she said. "We will transmit the details for the transfer." The channel closed. Within the hour, Grand Minister Solar was arrested on the imperial capital. His own guards turned on him, the same men who had saluted him that morning, who had called him minister with respect and deference. They had watched the battle footage. They had seen 80 ships die in 3 minutes. They put him in restraints without a word, and he did not resist, because the look in their eyes told him that resistance would not improve his situation. He was transferred to human custody the following day. He said nothing during the transfer. The arrogance that had driven him to order the death of 4,000 civilians had evaporated like mist in sunlight, replaced by the blank, hollow stare of a man who had finally understood the size of the thing he had provoked. Across the galaxy, the reaction was swift and uniform. Every government, every empire, every federation and syndicate and coalition updated its military doctrine within the week. Strategists who had spent their careers planning for wars against each other quietly set aside their old models and began building new ones, not plans for war against humanity, but plans to ensure that war with humanity would never happen. The first line of every new doctrine was the same, written in a dozen different languages across 100 different worlds. Do not provoke the humans. The non-aggression treaty was signed within a month. Independent observers from 6 neutral species were appointed to enforce it. The Droon military commanders responsible for the Elysium massacre were tried under galactic law and convicted. Reparations flowed to the families of the dead, not enough to fill the absence left behind, but enough to show that the galaxy had acknowledged what was taken from them. On the day the Adriatic prepared to leave Vathari space, Captain Vasquez stood on the observation deck at the rear of the ship. The viewport stretched from floor to ceiling, and through it she could see the stars of Sector Darval, cold, distant points of light scattered across the infinite dark. Commander Akafer found her there, standing with her hands clasped behind her back. Her reflection ghosted faintly on the glass. "The treaty is signed," he said. "Solar is in custody. The fleet is standing down. We have clearance to return home." Vasquez nodded, but did not turn from the viewport. "Do you think it will hold?" Akafer asked quietly. "The peace?" Vasquez was silent for a long moment. She looked out at the stars, the same stars that her ancestors had once looked up at from the surface of a small blue world, wondering what was out there, fearing what might come down from the sky. Those ancestors had built fires to push back the dark. They had built walls to keep out the predators. They had built weapons to defend what they loved, and they had passed that instinct down through 1,000 generations until it became something more than habit. It became identity. "It will hold," she said at last, "because now they understand something about us." "What is that, Captain?" She turned from the viewport and looked at Akafer with eyes that held 40 years of silence, 4,300 names, and the weight of a species that had been afraid since the day it first opened its eyes, and had turned that fear into something the galaxy would never forget. "We do not want war," she said. "We never did, but we will always be ready for one." She walked past him and off the observation deck, back to her bridge, back to her crew, back to the quiet and steady work of keeping her people safe in a universe that had never once promised them safety. The Adriatic powered up its drives and turned toward home. It crossed the border of Vathari space without ceremony, without fanfare, without a single word of farewell. It simply left, the same way it had arrived, silent, patient, and utterly unafraid. And at the edges of known space, 4 energy signatures that had been holding position for days, visible, watchful, waiting, powered down their transponders one by one and vanished into the dark. The contingency dissolved like shadows at dawn, slipping back into the silence from which they had come. The galaxy breathed again. Commerce resumed. Diplomats returned to their posts. Ships flew their routes. Life went on as it always did in the vast and busy theater of civilizations that stretched from one end of the stars to the other. But beneath the normalcy, something had changed, something permanent. A memory had been burned into the collective consciousness of every species alive, the memory of a small, dark ship sitting calmly at the heart of an empire, surrounded by giants and not flinching. Not once. The galaxy would move on. It would trade and argue and build and scheme and do all the things that living civilizations do. But it would not forget. It would never forget.